Mondays with Mike. Here we resume our discussion from last week on Mondays with Mike. I start by wondering if the executive branch has ever had this much in the moment power compared to the other two branches, and with the acquiescence to a degree of the other two branches.
Maybe during the Civil War when Lincoln suspended.
During a war, yeah, when he suspended habeas corpus, or World War II, but not for some time. Now, I'll share a personal anecdote. I once was privy to the actions of a particular charity to help the homeless. The charity went to pains not to just give people money straight up, because unfortunately it could be spent on drugs, and even if it wasn't, the charity wanted to direct the spending of the goods to make sure it went to the proper things, and also to a degree to limit it so that you could help many people as opposed to just helping a few people. But one of the things that I didn't care for was that buying gas for people was complicated. And they had a particular gas station that they could write vouchers to that particular gas station. That part was fine. But many people did not have their proof of insurance on them when they requested the gas. And if they didn't have it, the charity would not provide the gas. And I thought to myself, but many of them didn't come in their car, and they might not have it with them. And I said, what is this based on? And they said, here's the scenario. Somebody could buy gas. Then, if they're not insured, they could get in a car accident. And if they're in a car accident and they're not insured, then perhaps we would be liable, because we provided the gas that made the car go, that caused the thing. There was a case in Vermont where somebody was sued over this. And I said, what was the outcome of that case? And they said, the party was not held responsible. And I said, precisely, the party was not held responsible. And they said, we do not want to risk litigation. And I just shook my head. It's like, if you're not willing to go to bat, if you don't step up to the plate, you're not going to hit the home run.
That's actually the concern from this memo, is that in fear of losing their funding, they may step back, or instead of trying to be innovative or explore more ways to study DEI or to explore more areas of research, out of fear of never receiving funding for this research, students may never pursue any number of subjects for study for a PhD or doctoral thesis because they fear their funding won't exist. So the whole point is that if the enterprise of knowledge acquisition and understanding for universities is to expand all known human knowledge, this fundamentally jeopardizes that mission because it limits what you might call the umbrella of acceptable knowledge worth studying. It's like the Catholic Church stopping Galileo from chatting about astronomy and the universe and locking him up in a house. Like, you can't defy church doctrine, dude. Same kind of deal that the federal government on high is saying you can't study diversity, equity, or inclusion, despite the fact that we're one of the most diverse countries. There are some aspects of the country that are highly inequitable, and there are some aspects of the country's history that were not inclusive at all, and there's some aspects of the current government's programs that aren't 100% inclusive, showing people the door and saying leave.
That might have been a good way to get people to study science. If you compare it to Galileo, and you just imagine the Catholic Church, if you just imagine it in a comedic way, it just in Galileo's time, and they just come to him and they're like, don't you go talking about planets! I don't want to hear you talking about the solar system. It would sound ridiculous.
The Inquisition existed. They decided it wasn't a witch, and they burned them. So this is the same kind of thing of, instead it replaced the word witch with somebody who does DEI. You got the same kind of dogmatic nonsense of, they're not clearly defining what DEI is. There's some strange level of ambiguity, and yet all schools that receive federal funding have to comply with this completely ambiguous unknowable directive. That's not how you implement public policies. It just screams incompetence. That's my
Yeah.
take on that. This is not a
Yeah. It's like,
competent way to run a government.
yeah.
It's like, hey, university students, be the Galileo of your day.
Yeah.
Study DEI.
If that's where we're headed, that's scary. Of academics
Yeah.
having to go back to being, well, I mean, in some ways they are, but having to go back to being, these outlier heroes who are risking their, professional reputations and their freedom just to study things because the political flavor of the year of every 4 years decides, oh, you don't get to study this huge swath of human knowledge because we've decided that it's just no longer acceptable to study. Same with climate change, right? It's infuriating. This happened with the EPA, where the EPA was saying, "Oh, we're just not going to study the effects of climate change and greenhouse gases anymore as being damaging."
It's okay. It's okay. We already know it's damaging. We don't. What more evidence do we need?
Exactly, but a whole bunch of scientists rose up and said, "Wait a second. We
Yeah.
know that it's damaging. We can't just say it's not damaging. We already know that one, it's
Right.
bad, and two, it's getting worse. We can't just ignore
How
it."
about this?
How about this? If you cut the funding, we will just assume ever after that we were right. So if you continue studying it, maybe it'll turn around and then you'll have a greater debate. But if you cut the funding, we're just going to assume that it's going to get worse and worse forever. I'm enjoying this way too much. This is a drastic concern. I need to stop laughing about this.
We can't
Yeah.
laugh when it starts manifesting in them burning all the books and locking up all the libraries and stopping funding for any and all institutions that don't comply lockstep with everything that they say and nothing else. Manifestly is ignoring truth as something worth valuing. That they're acknowledging there's a whole section of human understanding and culture and communication that they just don't want to talk about. And that's very un-American. When you're talking about land of the free and home of the brave, it seems very cowardly to run away from any discussion about diversity in the context of our shared reality. There is something very scary about that in terms of how it's manifesting in a majority political party. Because remember, the largest library in the world is the United States Library of Congress. One of the largest research institutions in the world is the Congressional Research Service. And both of those are funded by our government. Imagine if all that knowledge was lost, if they just decided to go through all of the Library of Congress and just take all the books and all the letters and all the mention of this definition of what DEI constitutes. What are we gaining is the question of a country with hundreds of millions of people all somehow ignoring the fact that we're not all the same. It's not embracing our differences. It's trying to erase the fact that differences exist. It's just bizarre.
Embrace, don't erase differences.
Sunlight is the best disinfectant, and unfortunately, these moves are plunging our country into darkness. Imagine the United States entering a technological dark age where the rest of the world has a much greater and nuanced understanding of what the world looks like and is, and compete economically based on that understanding, while we're left struggling to understand what's going on around us as we're plunged into this ignorant darkness.
It could be touched off by over-reliance on AI, by habits of, oh, it's all about making money as opposed to finding the truth. If I may, I've sort of charted it out here on this note card that I think is what is going on currently, perchance. So Congress sets laws, but how specifically do they set laws? In recent years, probably recent decades, they've allowed executive agencies a lot of latitude as to what exactly the laws will be. They sort of pass the general idea of it, and then they leave it to the executive to enforce. There was a CGP Grey video about this recently.
That was known as the Chevron rule, where agencies had a lot of latitude in determining rulemaking authority and all that. But there was a Supreme Court decision recently that changed our understanding of that. It put a lot more power in the hands of the executive. Anyways, sorry, go on. I apologize.
No. The context is great, and that's why it's called Mondays with Mike. Then the court could stand in the way of executive actions, and lower courts have. But when it comes to the Supreme Court, number one, 3 of them are Trump appointees, 3 out of 9, and others agree with him. And number 2, there's the immunity decision. I do not know how much the immunity decision would actually apply in this case, but it might. So you have both branches of government and Congress controlled by the GOP, currently both houses, and the GOP, it is fair to say, controlled by Trump or Trump allies. So you have both branches of government at some level of acquiescence with the Trump agenda. Then you have impoundment. According to a previous episode we did, it's not the way the government works, but if he does it, it has the chilling effect. And it can have an immediate effect before a lower court reverses it. And if a lower court reverses it, perhaps another step court will unreverse it, and who knows what the Supreme Court will do. So in any case, wrenches can be thrown into the system. The executive, who usually enforces the law, can throw wrenches into the system, likely with a degree of immunity. I am not a legal scholar. I do not know to what degree that applies, but likely with some degree. So, as a result, you get people with the chilling effect. You get people constricting their actions because they don't want to get tied up in the business, the legal system.
That's a pretty good explanation of what's going on, is that the executive can try to do things, and depending on the speed with which the courts react or try to stop those things from happening, the effects of what the executive does can be felt much quicker than the remedy. That's what we see happening now with these funding freezes and these people being fired, all these grants being shut down, like U.S. aid. I think it was 15,000 grants were canceled. That's a lot, right? Even if it is true that the executive couldn't do that, that Congress appropriated the money and that the executive was just supposed to make sure the money went to where it was supposed to, the courts take a long time to address these problems. And so in the interim, all of those effects, the consequences of food rotting in ports and people not getting medicine and people not having jobs, that happens. And in some cases, you can't reverse those consequences, right? Starving people don't get food when they need it. I was reading there's 1,000 different provisioners of food in Sudan, for example, was 1,000 different camps of U.S. aid providing food assistance to starving people in a war zone in Sudan. If that's all shut down immediately, it's not like there's some magical other U.S. aid out there in the world that's going to show up and provide food to all these groups. That was it. And so people are going to starve and die. And so even if the courts respond and re-implement these funding, there's a lag time. And that lag time is a flaw of the system. Sure, things may be written down on paper as this is the law and the law must occur as it's written, but there's some latitude given to the executive in terms of that enforcement. That ambiguity, again, leads to some of these huge problems of the fact that the Supreme Court didn't make it clear what exactly constitutes all the official acts. The president can interpret that as a huge category of acts are just all official, and therefore there's immunity.
I guess, quick deviation on that. When you say, oh, what if they went through the Library of Congress and picked out the words? So I'm actually of two minds on that. First of all, if they did that, everyone would see it doesn't look good, and they wouldn't be doing it for very long, is the one thought. And my initial thought, and the thought that I hope is true. But on the other hand, the things that we have seen in the last month, if you had told me that Trump Gaza would be a thing 2 months ago, I would have bet against that and given the person that I was placing the bet with good odds. But here we are. So there's just this thing in my mind that says, don't say it, don't even think something he might do, Which sounds crazy because next week they'll do it. Like, I could imagine him saying something like, well, books are very good. We like books a lot, but some books, people don't really like them very much. Like Saul Alinsky's books, they're not very good. And if we want government efficiency, they're really better as kindling than as reading material, I tell you. They're very boring, very hurtful, very bad for our country, but the heat they provide is good, and so this is government efficiency. And he didn't say anything like that. But if he did, I would no longer be surprised. It isn't even a chilling effect. There's a chilling effect, and then there's a whatever this is that I'm thinking about. What's it gonna be next? What kind of roller coaster am I gonna see out my front window tomorrow? You don't know. You just don't know. To conclude the note card, then not only is there the chilling effect, but for those currently in there, but the choice to continue in a current career, or the choice more to choose it as a future career, so that intermittent funding becomes sustained manpower shortage, people power shortage, sustained job applicant shortage in these things.
So people choose to apply to institutions and programs that cohere with their values, meaning that people want to work for something that they agree with and support. And it's very clear that this effort to eliminate DEI programs and curriculum and message is not something that is widely supported by a lot of the people who work in academia. The stakeholders had to create them and continue to fund them and support them from their creation. And so, yes, that's exactly the issue, is that it's going to create a brain drain, and it's not clear that the people who could be doing jobs that require advanced degrees in education will decide to continue to work for the United States government or in the United States at all if there's better opportunities elsewhere in the world for them to pursue what they value and believe is important to study and research in the world. Yep.
Lastly, there's the thought that all these might be executive orders now, but if Trump, especially if he's more popular, because he is extraordinarily popular, he is popular like no one living with the people he is popular with. And he is unpopular like no one living with the people he is unpopular with. So, if all the swing voters went over to Trump, then there's the thought that, well, maybe Congress will eventually enact these things that were executive orders. Like with Otto von Bismarck, he was the Prime Minister of Prussia and then the Chancellor of Germany for some years, and for some time he just ruled because the legislature wasn't doing what he wanted. But then he got a legislature that he wanted, and they passed a law. He's like, oh yeah, everything you did, that actually was retroactively what you should have been doing. So there's that thought as well in terms of the chilling effect. So to counter the chilling effect, DEI, be the Galileo of your day. Or like, it's not witchcraft, or it's which, I don't know with that one. That one I got to workshop.
They're trying to ignore reality in service of a fundamentalist approach to what I guess they think reality should look like or reflect. But ignoring reality still has serious economic ramifications and also ramifications in terms of competitiveness within the world, that the United States doesn't exist on an island of its own, right? It's a huge, very complicated, multifaceted world, and limiting our understanding of that world in pursuit of some dogmatic notion of what DEI is ignores the fact that DEI is a pursuit of a better understanding of the world and a reflection of that understanding. That's the issue that I have the most with this memo and this approach, is that it's sending us backwards in time instead of helping equip the future generations with the knowledge they'll need to succeed and thrive in the future of tomorrow. It's just a roadblock.
We'll see you next week here on Mondays with Mike.
All right.